Deuteronomy 32:7. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will tell thee thy elder. He will show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee. God here through Moses, when the children of Israel were getting ready to go into the promised land, in so many words said, if you got a question, let me tell you a great place to start. Go to the men that have been around for a while. Ask them, and they'll tell you. This is Father's Day. And mothers, I guess mothers probably want a few things here and there, but dads really don't. I mentioned this morning, dads exist for a couple of purposes. We know things and we fix stuff. That's what we do. And there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of wisdom in these heads. And they've got some areas of expertise to them. We have got LaFord, who knows a little bit about the military. And I'm assuming you still know how to tie knots and stuff like that. He was in the Navy. A lot of other things as well. He's worked in the industry. And Brother Wayne has done agriculture all his life and also fixed machinery. Brother Bridges knows a little bit about machinery here and there and also has done concrete, runs his own business. And Brother Gary, an appliance repairman. That's kind of handy. He knows about repairing appliances. And Brother Jimmy is both a martial artist, knows a good bit about self-defense, and he's a hearing expert. But Chip's got a business degree from Gardner-Webb University, of all things. I think God is saying he cheated to get that. I mean, it sounds like that's what that was. I've got a business degree, and then Brother Bruce has worked in machinery and machining, etc., woodwork, etc., a little bit of everything else. All of them are saved. All of them love the Lord. They have guided people and their families and others in the way of the Lord. There's a lot of wisdom up here. For my part, I'm obviously a pastor, evangelist, author, historian, a few other things. So we're going to do something. We're going to have the dad panel tonight. And I know there's definitely going to be some people wanting to have some fun. I know that's just our folks. But we're also going to have some serious questions as well, because you'd be surprised, again, how much wisdom you can find for men like this. And I'm going to have some questions for myself and some spiritual questions to go along with some physical questions. So I hope you've been getting your questions ready that we've been talking about from this morning. So let's see if anybody has one to start with. You direct the questions to me, and I'll direct them to myself, one of the men. Yes, sir, brother.
As a father, correction of my children was an issue a good bit. Not a good bit, but it was issue for me, not my children, but to do it properly. And I'd like to hear somebody else's wisdom. Thank God my dad, he prayed over me before he gave me a whooping. So that really and truly, that tore me up worse than a whipping did. I'll be honest about it. But I'd like to hear some wisdom about that.
See, in our house is a little bit different because I prayed before it happened in our house. I mean, don't let Mama kill me. So anyway, so the question is about child discipline, and how do you do it? What are the steps? I'm going to start with Brother Wayne on this one. I'll give you this, sir.
Well, I'm with the preacher. My dad, before he started whooping me, I did a whole lot of praying. But with us, Kalena was very stubborn.
I can't imagine that.
Switch on her a whole lot. But main thing that helped us was trying to calm down a few minutes before and think about it and then talk to them, and then do the whooping after we talk to them, and then talk to them again after we whooped, so they understand why they got the whooping and we just ain't beating them.
Yeah. Let me elaborate on something he just said here, because he hit something that's absolutely perfect. I'm glad he mentioned we talk about it first. Study the Scripture. Do you notice how God never did just whack people? I mean, when they did something wrong, God would send a prophet to them. Thus saith the Lord, thou art about to be whacked. Okay. He always sent somebody with a message and told them what they'd done and what they would expect. And a lot of times he even, and this is, as a kid, I hated this one. A lot of times he even asked them what they wanted. It's like, do you want to be whacked with days of famine? Do you want to be whacked by your enemies? Do you want to be whacked with the switch, whatever the case may be? I always hated that one as a kid. Choose your pants. But the idea of letting them know what it's for and of giving the chance to cool down first, really, really important. God always did things methodically, because the purpose for punishment never was the infliction of any kind of pain, physical or emotional. The purpose of it was a change of behavior and a change of heart. So I'll absolutely love that. I do talk to him. Good answer. Next question. What's your next question out there?
Okay, lying is wrong, correct?
What now?
Lying is wrong, correct?
It depends on your definition of lying. An untruth for the purpose of deception, for an illicit purpose, that definition of lying, absolutely. But telling an untruth for the purpose of saving a life, like they were doing hiding the Jews during World War II, that doesn't even meet the biblical qualification of lying. So that depends on your whole definition of lying. If you understand lying as for a wrong purpose, to gain an advantage to yourself or to cheat somebody else, absolutely. If you are being deceptive for the purpose of saving a life, that doesn't even meet the biblical qualification of lying. Is that where you were going with that one?
Yeah, with Rahab.
Rahab? Yeah. A good friend of mine calls it telling a Rahab. And I very much like, instead of telling a lie, telling a Rahab. Because again, she wasn't doing this for herself. She's doing this to try to save innocent lives. So big distinguishment. A lie is not just an untruth. It's an untruth that has a purpose that is not a good purpose. For instance, anybody ever had a surprise birthday party? You were ever told you were going somewhere and you got there on a surprise birthday party? Is that what God's talking about? No, not at all. Not at all. Okay, next question. What else you got?
Not yet.
Oh, boy.
I get that one later. I work with a guy who 100% thinks like Israel is like completely in the wrong with everything going on, and I was kind of wanting to get your take and any of their takes about the whole situation and why they're not in the wrong.
Okay. Let me start with that one as well, and then I may open it up a little bit to one or two of the others on the platform as well. Let's do a little bit of history work, shall we? Because nothing happens in a vacuum, and what you see in the now is preceded by what came before it in the past, in the decades beforehand. Who knows? Anybody on the platform know what Iran used to be called before? Persia. Very good. But it's called Persia. Persia and Israel for 2,700 years had a very good relationship all the way from the time of Esther. They actually had no enmity between them. There's a date that it changed. It changed in 1979. The Shah Pahlavi was in charge of Iran. He was deposed by an Islamic caliphate. From the day the Islamic caliphate came in, the Ayatollah Khomeini made this statement, day one: we will exterminate Israel. Day one. Okay, so they started the enmity in 1979, and since then they have been attempting that over and over again. Their main usage has been through proxy fighters. They have funded people doing the fighting for them. They have also used some of their own fighters. They've used some of their own terrorist groups. But they have been actively seeking the destruction of Israel since the year 1979, and now they are pretty close to having the capacity to do it. Israel has never sought 1 ounce of their treasure or 1 inch of their land. All she's wanted is the tiny little sliver of land that we call modern-day Israel. She's not been allowed that. Iran and her proxies have tried to push her into the Mediterranean Sea. How many of you hear the statement, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free? All right. Again, the caliphate started that statement. What it means is genocide Israel, get rid of them, destroy them. They will never be satisfied as long as there's one Jew alive on earth, especially not in Israel. So if they were to say today, if Iran today said, we're done, we're not trying to hurt you anymore, there would not be one more drop of bloodshed. Nothing at all. With every country that has ever made any remote peace with Israel, there's been no more trouble. Egypt went against the grain and signed a peace treaty with them back in the late 1980s. Egypt and Israel have gotten along very well since that time. They're not bosom buddies, but there's been no bloodshed between the two of them because Egypt's not trying to kill them. So this is not Israel's doing, this is Iran's doing. But Chip, you grew up, again, with a historian in the house a lot like I did. You got anything you want to add to that?
First of all, Israel's never been the aggressor. It's always tried to defend itself. And if you look at a map of that portion of the world, look how large Iran is and the other countries that hate Israel, and how small Israel is. It's amazing that they've got this one little tiny piece of the world, and those countries that hate them don't want them to have it. So they've never been the aggressor. Israel's never been the aggressor. They've always just tried to defend themselves over the attacks or planned attacks that have happened.
Yep. I don't know if you're familiar with the the attacks on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the Jewish year, the Day of Atonement. 1972, they're celebrating the Day of Atonement, minding their own business. Everybody is worshiping. It's like Easter and Christmas together for us. Everybody's worshiping. 6 Arab nations, including Iran, chose that day to attack them without warning because they knew they wouldn't be ready for it. It's been the same thing all the way through from 1948 on out. They've just tried to survive. Their land is 90 miles long by about 20 miles wide. It is tiny, and even that won't be afforded to them by the Islamic Caliphate. As long as there's an Islamic Caliphate in Iran, there will be no peace because their goal, their apocalyptic jihadist goal, is to destroy every Jew on earth. And I can show you that from the Quran, the Hadiths, everything else. Good question. Okay, next, over here. I'm sorry, back in the back.
Concerning that, can you also address the Zionism issue?
Can I what now?
The Zionism issue.
Zionism. Let's talk about Zionism just for a little bit. When you hear the word Zionism, do you hear it mentioned positively or negatively? Almost always negatively. You don't even know where Zionism came from. Zion, of course, is the Old Testament name, one of the Old Testament names for Jerusalem. It's also called Sion, S-I-O-N. It's talking about the mount there in Jerusalem. Zionism, as a goal, as a political aim, came about in the early 1900s. There was a trial in France. Anybody ever heard of the Dreyfus trial? Any of y'all familiar with that just a little bit? There was a French military officer of Jewish origin, Alfred Dreyfus. He got framed for espionage and treason. It was very easily proven that he was not the one that did it, and yet the French courts convicted him anyway because they were looking for a Jewish scapegoat. A journalist named Emile Zola conclusively proved him innocent beyond any shadow of a doubt, for which they shot Emile Zola and tried to kill him as well. They proved him innocent 2 or 3 times, and yet he continually gets railroaded. The French government finally admitted that they railroaded him. 100 years later. The whole world already knew it. 100 years later, they admitted it. When some people started seeing this, some people who had been in favor of the assimilation of the Jews into the nations said, this is never going to work. We're never going to have any place where we're safe unless we have a homeland. That's where Zionism had its birth. 1919, the World War I is raging on. Britain is in a lot of trouble. They are running out of gunpowder. They look to a young chemist named Chaim Weizmann. I say, hey, we need some help. Chaim Weizmann said, I can help. He found a way to make cordite out of horse chestnuts, which are all over Great Britain. Cordite's one of the ingredients for a black powder, for gunpowder. This chemist helped save Britain during World War I. He's a Jew, Chaim Weizmann. Because of this, Lord Balfour said, Our Majesty views with favor the establishment of a homeland for Israel in their ancestral homeland of Israel, the Balfour Declaration. From there, the United Nations takes over, or the world body of nations, which precedes the United Nations. They take over, and they're the ones that start the idea of Zion actually being the homeland of the Jews again. So the nations of the world basically give them a place to live for saving Western civilization. They're about to be overrun. The Jews save the world again. They've done that several times, and this is where Zionism comes from. Alfred Dreyfus, the Dreyfus trial, Lord Balfour, all of that. So Zionism is nothing more than the Jews saying what God said to Jeremiah. You're going to come to this land. One of them will come to this land. You're not going to go to East Africa like Britain offered. You're going to come back to this land. So all it is saying, we've been here for 3,000 years. It's time for us to have our home again. That's Zionism. And you want to add anything to that? No, it's mostly a history thing again. All right. Anything else? What next question?
Becca would like to ask how you handle dealing with a worldly work environment and negativity at work, and then come home and being a good, godly father and husband and having a good attitude towards your family.
All right. Say that again.
How you handle dealing with a worldly work environment and then coming home and being a good, godly father and having a good attitude with your family.
How do you handle work environment and come home and be a good, godly environment, produce a good, godly environment for your family? Good question. Bruce, you want to try that one? Let's start there.
I've worked in factories most of my life and been in the military too, and you're going to encounter, people from all walks of life. And I learned early on you got to learn how to get along with people, but to be a Christian in a work environment is basically choosing your words, and how to plan them, because it's just like we was talking about with the kids earlier. You want to calm down before you talk to your kids or punish them or whatever, so they'll understand what's going on. You're going to hear stuff in the workforce that you just want to jump on them about. Be like, you are an idiot. But you can't do that. You want to say, you had to come up with, for instance, it's just like the other day. I had a fella. They couldn't understand why Israel had bombed Iran, but he didn't say that. He just sat down and said, "Why does everybody want to bomb everybody? Why can't everybody just get along? Why can't everybody just bomb everybody?" And I said, "Hang on, what are you talking about? We were on break, and he said they're bombing. Everybody's trying to blow each other up." And I said, "Hang on." I said, "Who are you talking about? What are you talking about?" Now, I had heard on the news about the nuclear sites that had been taken out, and I knew what he was talking about. And he finally broke down. He said they just said that Israel had bombed Iran. And I said, "Well, if Israel bombed Iran, I'm for that." And he's kind of looking at me, and my buddy across the table he said, "Yeah, I'm for that too." And then of course he's looking at me incredulously, and I was like, "Well, Israel's not out to bomb Iran, but it's just like if we had next door neighbors and they've been threatening to create nuclear weapons and bomb us with them, that's what the Cuban Missile Crisis was all about. We ain't going to let that happen." Right. I said, "We got a preemptive strike before something like that happens, So you gotta choose what you're going to say, and you got to make sure they understand, because it's so easy for the world to say, "Why can't everybody just get along?" But everybody ain't going to get along.
Let me focus it a little bit, Bruce.
Yeah.
To the question she was asking, you've had all that trouble at work. You've had all the fights, all the arguments. You probably heard cursing and lewd jokes at work.
Yeah.
How do you dispose of that before you get home? How do you not bring that home? How are you a godly influence by the time you get there?
Well, you just got to have the Lord with you the whole time. And then I've always called it red flags. And Chris, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's when somebody says something, it should bring up a red flag. And you just deal with it in your mind right there. You don't, if somebody says something at work, whatever it could be, something to make me mad, or something to get me on a rabbit trail in my own brain, or something to make me want to argue, you got to sit there. You need to deal with it individually with the Lord on your own, in your mind, each time it happens, so that it'll be done with before you get home.
Okay.
You don't want to come home with something stewing in your mind and then let it, just spew out on your family, and kind of take it out on them. If you had some kind of complication with somebody at work or something like that, you need to deal with them about it. Really, at work, deal with them about it, and then if you need to, talk to the Lord all the way home about it before you get home. Fortunately for me, I've got like a 45-minute drive in the afternoon, so I can talk to. You can listen to your gospel music on the way home. But the red flag should, if it don't bring up something in your mind, if it's a question you can't answer, then go to the Scripture. If you can figure it out in your head with the Scripture you've read, then that's fine. If it ain't, if it's something you need to study, then when you get home, figure it out. Get on in your Bible, or or whatever you got to pull out your concordance and figure out what the answer is before you start letting it flow over into your family time.
Let me make it a little bit harder. You've got a 45-minute drive. Jimmy has got about an hour drive or so your answer's probably going to be about the same. I'm guessing you're spending a lot of time in the car praying before you get home. But the Ford has about a 2-minute drive. And Walmart is a wonderful place. God bless. They're wonderful. Conducive to godliness. You're almost in heaven. So Brother Ford, you've had a bad day at work. It's gone rough at work, and you don't have much time by the time you get home. What do you do to make sure you're ready to help produce that godly environment by the time you get home, when you don't have very long at all?
No, I don't have very long at all. But
hold it close.
I don't have very long at all to get there. But a lot of times I still do just exactly what Bruce said. I get it in my mind right there. I pretty much try to end it right at the plant right there. And if I can't, I do. I go to the Lord right away. And I praise the Lord because a lot of times when I get into situations, he's already given me answers in the Bible. When I've done my quiet time with him in the morning, it's before I get out of bed. I have my devotions before I go to work. So I've already got my defense right there. The Lord's before me. And he usually, very few times, he has not given me what I needed to answer them. And just when I leave that, especially if it's negative, I leave that pretty much at the door or bring it to the prayer room.
Amen. How many of you men, that's basically the same thing you do. You leave it there rather than bring it home. Go right here. Yep.
You know, and as an employer, that there's another end to that.
Yeah.
Where you have employees that can't leave their problems at home. They bring them to work.
Mm.
And that's a big deal. And I try to do the same thing with them. I try to tell them, sometimes you just got to leave that at the door. You got to leave those problems. And that's the same way. Sometimes you got to leave work. You just got to leave it. You got to walk away. And being somebody that employs people, sometimes it's hard to do that. And as I've grown older and hopefully a little wiser, I try to communicate with my family if I've had a bad day at work. I try to talk with them some about it.
So you let them in on it a little bit.
I let them in on it a little bit.
Okay.
And just so I could maybe hear something from them that would help me on that. But, you know, as an employer, sometimes I tell them, boys, you got to leave your home. Sometimes you got to leave it at home. I know that's not too comforting, but, and especially somebody that is an employee, sometimes I got to leave my home at home. You know, there's stuff going on in my life. There's stuff going on in your life. And sometimes you just have to leave it. When you shut the door of home, you got to leave it, and you got to go be the other. You got to be the employer then. You got to be two different people, you know. And sometimes it's hard, but it's you talk to the Lord about it. He'll give you the insight that you need to handle those situations.
The term for what all three of those men just mentioned is compartmentalization. You basically segment things off into compartments, and you deal with them while you're in them, and then you leave everything there until you come back to them. Sometimes that's the only way to survive, especially when you're in a hard work environment. Good answers. What else?
I guess specifically maybe for those who own their own businesses, but for the entire panel, how do you deal with work-life balance? Right? For those of you who own your own business, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of hats you have to wear. And on top of that, you come home and then you have your wife you need to take care of, and your children you need to do whatever you need, you know, meet their needs. How do y'all deal with that?
Work-life balance. I recommend not balancing it, just work all the time. I'm kidding. No, Brother Gary runs his own business. I think it's a good answer to that. But Gary, how do you do the work-life balance thing?
Well, I recently started my own back in February, and when I first started it was chaotic at first. But I've learned that family is the most important thing over work. You could work all day and make a lot of money, but if you're not home to spend it with your family, what is it really worth anything? I always look at stuff, you could have nice cars, nice houses, but in 100 years, what do you have left at the end of it?
Jimmy, weigh in on that one. Work-life balance.
I run a $1.3 million company for somebody else, and have employees and everything that I'm over. And there's a lot of stuff that these gentlemen have said that I've got to leave there. And luckily, thank you, Lord, that I have about an hour to, it has been, 2.5+ hours, depending on traffic, ride home. So that gives me a lot of time to, think, and I'll say defuse. I mean, that's the only word that I can think of. I'm I'm thinking about the situation. Like, okay, I got to leave that back at work. I'll get back to that tomorrow. Right now I'm heading home. I'm thinking about what I've got to do at home. When I get there now, and I guess the main thing is praying about it. If you can feel that okay, it's still with me. I didn't leave that there. Then that's immediately when I go to prayer. I'm like, okay, Lord, please, I've got to leave that there till I get back to it. Let me go home and do what I need to do there, and I'll come back to that. But luckily the Lord has given me a little bit of a drive so that I can do that.
Well, the work-life balance thing. Then I'll turn to the next question. There's a British statesman whose name escapes me right now, but I've got him on my history books. What's unique is that both he and his son journaled about the same day. In his journal, he's a busy statesman. In his journal, he put, "My son wanted to go fishing today. Spent the entire day fishing with him. A day wasted." His son's journal had, "I got to fish my dad today. Best day I've ever had." Radical difference. If you gain $1 trillion and you lose the affection and the love of your family, you're poor. Money's a poor substitute for having the love of family. So my answer is, remember what's important. And if you have to make a mistake to one side or the other, make sure your family feels like you've been lavish with your time to them. Make sure that they don't ever feel like they've had to survive on scraps. And preachers are some of the world's worst on this, which is why so many preachers lose their families. They're so busy trying to save the world that they don't have time to play ball or to go out to eat or to sit and talk or anything like that. So just remember what's important, and family is a whole lot more important than any other form of success. Yes, Kara, start back there.
How do you balance saving up enough money for a down payment on a house while also investing and also making sure that you're not penny pinching and making yourself miserable in the process?
Okay. Brother Chip, Mr. Business, you want to answer that
one? Wow. Yeah, especially in today's world where houses and where everything costs so much more than me and Steph talk about this all the time. How when we got our first house, how did we do it? How in the world did we buy a house on my salary? And it's nearly impossible now to think about people trying to rent or buy houses. So it's a lot different now than when I bought my first house. But the principle is the same: is saving is important. We went over that in our financial study in Sunday school about especially. Let me give you this piece of advice. So those of you that are young or young adults, but you still live at home, that's a great time to pour money into savings because you don't have the overhead that someone who's living on their own has a house payment, rent, utilities, such things as that. So put as much as you can away in savings. Invest wisely. And I've really only been in the investing side of this about 7 years. So I'm still novice, I would say. I'm still a beginner, if you will, on that side of it. But I am investing now, and it makes a difference over time. You're not looking for a overnight fix with investing. You're looking for, especially you young people, you're looking for long-term growth. That you're not going to see overnight success, but you want to see long-term success. So invest wisely. A good financial advisor or a planner is excellent to use. That can help you in that. So those are my two advices. Put all the money you can back while you're saving. Continue saving after you have your own place as well, and invest wisely. Don't try to do the get rich quick things because that never works out, or most of the time does not work out. It's not worth a gamble. Might as well go buy lottery tickets.
I'll let Wayne answer this one too, because he and I have spoken about housing situation over the years and how they got there. So what's your answer for that one?
Well, this is the most difficult time that I've seen since I've been alive to start out. And I got a friend that's taking a lot of responsibility for the family, and we've talked a lot about it. And it's a rough time. He makes a lot of money, and he's fixing to
switch out.
He's fixing to put a whole lot of money, and he's made a lot of mistakes. He still lives at home, and he's 34 and hadn't put the money back like he should. But he's also went to the other side and done a whole lot of playing and wasting money and motorcycles, Mustangs, more guns than you could ever shoot and things, and not been responsible. Now he's fixing to have a family, and he's scrounging. Just the fact that you're asking the questions is the right spot, because you're already thinking responsibly. But us, we try to save. We prioritize first. We try to do some fun stuff with the family, but it ain't necessarily doing some enjoyable stuff. Don't necessarily have to be expensive. During COVID, we went camping down there on the creek. I took Gideon to the creek fishing the other day. Didn't cost us anything, but we had a whole bunch of fun. We went to the tractor show. It cost a ticket to get in, not expensive. We watched a lot of people spend millions of dollars running tractors down the track, but it was enjoyable, had an enjoyable evening, but it wasn't expensive. And we come to every church event we can because we get to fellowship and have enjoyment with that. And church events are free normally, and they're fun, and they don't just lift up your physical enjoyment, they lift up your spiritual enjoyment. So you can have fun like that, reasonable, and still be able to put money back while you're living at home and saving, and not being miserable while you're saving. Because if you end up miserable saving, I've seen a lot of people put money back their entire lives, die, and leave it to people that blow it in a few days. And it ain't worth it. I mean, the Lord didn't give it to us to be miserable. My dad taught me that money makes a very good tool and a very poor master.
Yep.
And if you kind of apply that process to it, a hammer makes a real good tool, but somebody can use it to murder somebody and just became evil. Money's the same thing. You can't let it control you. You have to control it and be responsible either way.
I like that answer. Dana knows a story, and I share this when I do marriage counseling with couples, and the sessions should get a kick out of this. When Dana and I first got married, we went to the first family reunion I got to go to down in Andalusia with a family. And for those who don't know Andalusia, I mean, God bless Andalusia. It is the armpit of the entire universe. It just is. I mean, it's just a wonderful place, but there's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing in Andalusia. And we got there, and I was in the grandparents' house, and there's a calendar on the wall, and I had all kinds of big figures in red on it all over the day. So it's like, well, these big numbers on here. And come to find out, it was all their CDs that were maturing. I'm like, there's a pretty substantial amount of money right there. They could have done some stuff. They could have done a lot of stuff. They didn't do anything. I think they left Andalusia one time to go to a funeral in California. That was it. Then got old, and the nursing home got all the money. That's a terrible idea. Terrible idea. So to Wayne's point, do enjoy life. Don't be a miser. Save. Look to the future. But yeah, by all means, enjoy it as well. Because man, if you die and you've not done anything with what God gave you, you're sort of missing the entire plot. So, good answer there. Yes, sir, himself.
One of the biggest things is being able to manage what you have. Sometimes you may not make a lot of money, but if you'll learn to manage the money that you have, and then say you may get a bonus or something, oh, well, you're going to go out and you're going to buy a new four-wheeler, you're going to take a vacation. You need to do something like what Wayne was talking about. Go to the creek. Go somewhere where it doesn't take a lot of money. Learn to manage the money that God's give you. That's one of the biggest problems with this country today.
Yeah.
People don't know how to manage your money. People spend way more money than what they bring in. And it's real easy to do nowadays because everything is extremely costly. So just sit down and set yourself a budget. And I'm guilty of not setting a budget, but I've always been able to kind of manage what I had as I've got older and not go spend crazy. That's the biggest thing is just take what money you got and hold on to it and of course, invest it. When you don't have a lot, you can't invest much. So if you'll just try to manage what you got, then God will supply you with enough to get you by. And Brother Wayne mentioned something about tithing first. You know, a lot of people have a problem with tithing. And I watched my daddy my whole life. We didn't have nothing growing up. You know, we might go to fish camp once a month if we was lucky to eat out. But I watched him put that tithe in that plate every Sunday. And we never did without. And when the Lord saved me, I started tithing.
Yes, sir.
And my wife said, "What you doing?" I said, "We got to give this tithe, honey." "But we ain't got it." I said, "Oh, we got it. We going to give it." We going to give it. One of the biggest things I can tell you is you can't afford not to tithe.
Amen. Good.
You can't afford not to tithe. He'll help you manage your money. Give him what's his, and then give him a little extra too. And he'll honor that.
I'll dovetail off that, then we'll go on to the next question. Some of you know the story, some of you don't. Karis knows the story, but it'll be a good reminder for her. Talking about how to get a house, especially in these tough times, and about the finances, how do you do it. There's a spiritual component to it as well. It's one of the most important things in your life, and God notices that, and he pays attention. Years ago, we were looking for a house, did not necessarily have the money to get one, and yet I told Dana, I said, we're going to do something weird. We're going to go looking for a house on Friday. She said, we don't have the money for a house. I said, I know, but let's just do it for fun anyway. I always wanted to live down by the river. So we pick up one of these books that has the houses in it. Now, well, here's one down by the river. It's too small and it's too expensive, but let's go look at it just for the fun of it. We go down here to look at this house. It is like, back then, we're talking 12, 13 years ago, almost $200,000, and it's like 1,000 square feet. It would never do. So we're looking at this house. Oh, it's a pretty place. It would never do. And I hear a slurred voice, a drunk voice from the yard beside us.
Hey, you Bo Wagner?
Yeah, last time I checked.
You used to work with my wife.
I said, is that right? And he called out the name of the place and called her, and it's like, well, yeah, I did. He said,
what are you doing now? Here.
So we're just out looking for houses.
You looking for a house on the river?
Well, yeah, that's why we're here.
I know where it's a big and you can get cheap.
Really?
Well, down there past all the junk and everything.
We drove down there, and I started laughing. I told Dana, I said, this place can be gotten for nothing. I mean, it looked like bombs had gone off in it. I mean, it looked like it had been struck as a nuclear facility. I mean, and I told Dana, I said, we can get this thing for nothing. And we know how to fix stuff. And we bought our house in 5 acres for $58,000. And we've been fixing it ever since. The children make fun that I still don't have the molding up, but it's livable. It's livable. But God did that. God did that. And if you'll trust the Lord, Brother Bridges said, and trust the Lord, and Brother Wayne said, just trust the Lord and do right, God opens doors. So don't just feel like you've got to figure out how to get a house. You do right and obey the Lord and make that a matter of prayer and watch God move. See what he does. Next question.
Hey, real quick on the house thing. If you haven't looked into a USDA loan, they offer a zero down payment if you are in a rural area. Yeah. And I actually got 2 more. Gary, would you be able to give me some advice? I need an evaporator coil put in on an air handler. Are you? Is that the kind of appliances you work on, or no?
Refrigerators, washers, dryers, that kind of stuff. I don't think we have any HVAC people in church I know of. Yeah. Wish we did. I've been praying for that for a long time. Somebody needs to get right with God and come.
The other one I had was just real quick on Mossad. I know we're circling back, but should we view Mossad with the same level of respect and support that we do Israel as a whole?
Mossad is an intelligence arm of Israel. Just like anything, it's been made up of good people and bad people. But they, through the years, have been probably one of the most upright and forthright of organizations, and trying to guard the innocent everywhere while at the same time trying to guard their people. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details there, but Mossad and IDF both have gone farther than we've ever gone in trying to protect themselves while trying to protect the innocents everywhere else. They give warnings a lot of times to people when they're about to do something, making their own life harder and putting themselves at risk. So while I will never give a blanket endorsement for any organization, IDF, Mossad, or otherwise, they're genuinely some of the best of the best. So, yeah. But Wayne, got a question for you. fruit trees. Got fruit trees where's ours? Got fruit trees in my yard. Been planting several kind of fruit trees. They'll bloom and blossom. They'll produce fruit one year, and then nothing the next or the next. Any idea what makes a fruit tree inconsistent in its bearing like that?
There's some types of fruit trees that bear every other year on purpose, the way they're designed.
Which ones?
Some apple trees, peach trees are notorious for it, and sometimes pear trees will do it. And it also has to do with the weather. If we get a lot of rain right as they're pollinating, the pollen gets washed away before they can be pollinated. Or if we get a frost and it freezes the blooms, they'll still look good, but they're not viable because they got frozen.
I got plum trees. They produced some last year for the first time ever. This year, not a single plum. So I wondered about that. But it's about the time it started raining real hard, too. So, yeah. So, anyway, okay. Curious about that. So nothing you can do about that, just sort of a weather thing there. Okay. Miss Dana, yes, ma'am.
Why will our fig trees not produce anything?
We've had those fig trees for about 5 or 6 years now. I've not got anything off of them, and I see them laughing. I'm interested in hearing this one.
We're a little bit too far north for fig trees to be able to bear because of the temperature zone. The ground gets too cool in the wintertime, and it don't have a long enough warm weather season. Old timers would take a fig tree and plant it near their chimney because the ground would stay warmer during the wintertime and it'd create a little warm air. You're close to a house foundation. I pulled mine up because I got tired of dealing with it.
Yank it out of the ground. I love that answer. That's awesome. Sorry.
I know Brother Wayne knows a little bit about this, but I kind of wanted to get your take on it. How do you shoot 100 on the security training?
How do you shoot 100 on security training?
Now, I know you ain't done it yet, but I mean, I know Mr. Wayne has. I maybe want to hear from some of these other guys who are pretty accurate with their shooting.
Okay. On the shooting 100, how do you do it? Let me talk about shooting in general a little bit, but some of these guys are better than I am. I can tell you this much. It's a patience game as much as golf is. Everybody grows up with movies. They see people doing this number with their gun and doing things like that. These guys, I'm going to let some of them answer, they're a lot better than I am, but the best shooters I have ever been around in my entire life are some of the, by nature, some of the calmest people. The people that are, like Hammy the squirrel bouncing all over the place, do not shoot as good as people who by nature are very placid people. I don't know if you guys have seen the same thing, but honestly, the ones I've seen that are just the most laid back, Jonathan, Mr. Laid Back. I mean, he could probably shoot 100 with like a rubber band. I mean, just that because again, doesn't hurry. But as far as shooter go, I know all these men up here are pretty good on the shooting. But I've seen Brother Wayne. I know you shoot pretty good. And you got the microphone. Give me your shooting tips on that.
Well, first you got to practice fundamentals, and you have to just practice. But you got to practice the fundamentals correctly. Mainly, trigger squeeze, firm grip, and front sight alignment on your target while you're looking at your target, and you don't jerk the trigger. And do it patiently, but with urgency, because if something's shooting back at you, you don't want to wait around.
Yeah.
And you need to practice for the scenarios that you may encounter. And you don't just practice once a year. You need to, every other week or so, run a magazine through your gun so you stay familiar with your trigger squeeze, knowing where the trigger wall is on semi-automatics especially, or revolvers. And it's completely different.
Define your term, trigger wall.
When you squeeze the trigger, you'll have a mushy spot at the beginning, and then it'll get real firm, and that's the wall in it, and right there is where it's going to break. You really want the wall to surprise you when the trigger breaks and detonates the firing pin for the primer, because if you're completely anticipating it, your body will anticipate the loud bang and the recoil, and you will jerk and pull your trigger off, or pull your sights out of alignment with your target. It's the reason most right-handed people shoot when they shoot their group, they shoot right on the target instead of on the center, is because they're anticipating and pulling. You need to learn where your trigger is, do dry fire practice, have somebody load dummy rounds in your gun at a random spot in the magazine, and after you fire a couple times, you hit that dummy, you'll see if you jerk. And if you jerk, you need to do dry fire practice and then some live fire practice while somebody's watching you and see if you're doing it or not.
Does dry firing hurt a gun?
Not if it's not a rim fire.
Okay.
Don't dry fire rim fires. The rest of them, if it's a modern gun, will not hurt it.
Rim fires, is that anything above 22? I know 22.
22 Magnum, 17 HMR.
Okay, and everything else is probably going to be center
9
fire then.
millimeter, 380, 357 is all center fire.
Okay, all right. Good answer. Good question. Brother Ford, you got any? What do you think?
Everything he said is right, but you got to be familiar and comfortable with your weapon. You got to know your weapon just as well as you know yourself. And if you don't, it'll be just like he said. And when somebody's shooting at you, you don't have that time to test yourself. You got to know it. You got to know it by instinct.
Yeah. I wish Brother Paul were here tonight. One of the favorite statements I love to hear him say, and I've heard him say it 100 times, is, if I can get to my weapon, it's not an emergency. Because again, he's shot so many tens of thousands of rounds through it that it's instinctive. So all those good question, good answers. What else?
I got one more.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite kid, and why is it Karis?
My favorite kid. Who's my favorite kid, and why is it Carrot? My favorite kid changes from day to day based on which one happens to not be sarcastic. I mean, it's just. Sometimes I don't have a favorite at all because of that. So anyway, next question. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
What gun should I get?
What gun should you get? For you, for somebody your size, your frame, personally, I like a smaller size 9mm. 380's an okay gun, but does not have the stopping power in my estimation. But a relatively compact size 9mm to me is a good balance of accuracy and stopping power.
Is that the one I shot for my class?
That's the one that I sent
you.
The
purple one.
Yes, that was your mom's EC9.
Okay.
Ruger EC9. Now the Ruger EC9 is my favorite. Any of y'all want to weigh in on, for a girl, what one you think?
There's a bunch of us in here have different guns. We can all get together at shooting range, and you can try out a bunch of different ones. It's not necessarily stopping power or whatever. It's whatever you can handle comfortably and reliably that fits your hand. I can handle all kind of different guns comfortably. I can't handle small guns comfortably. So small guns don't do me any good, even though they'll shoot a 9mm. I carry a little bit bigger one because it's comfortable for me. Kirsten carries 38 or 38 double action revolver because that's comfortable for her because she can't rack a slide. She don't have the grip strength. If you have a malfunction in a 9mm and you can't rack a slide, you got a rock.
That's good.
So
that's good.
You need to be able to function it completely every time and be very comfortable with it in your hand and comfortable carrying it. It's not necessarily the size of it or the stopping power.
Let me ask a survey question here. How many of you ladies carry a revolver? You ladies carry a revolver? 1, 2. How many of you ladies carry a semi-automatic? 1, 2. I know more than y'all. I know y'all carry. Y'all hide nothing. So about 50-50 on that. Revolver is a good option. Hammerless or no? I like hammerless because they don't get caught for a girl. But you think?
Personally, I prefer a hammer. But hammerless is better for not catching on stuff. But they both have. Hammerless has an internal hammer. It's just not exposed.
Got it.
And you have the option of pulling the hammer back for a lighter trigger squeeze. But they're both just as safe.
Okay. That answers your question, okay? All right. What else? Okay. Diana. Yep.
For guys, they can carry their gun on their belt pretty easily. What's the best way for a girl to carry it?
You're asking,
like I said,
you're asking guys what the best way for a girl to carry is?
Well,
that's, you really do think a lot of our wisdom.
Hey, like I said, but they have wives that carry. So it's like we don't have belt loops and belts on most of our clothing.
Right.
We have our pockets are flimsy.
Yep.
It ain't like you can carry one in your pocket. And it's like, if I put it in my purse, well, that's in my office. That stood me no good out here.
Yep.
What do y'all find, have y'all found for your wives to be the best way to carry?
Okay. What do you think, guys? Who wants that one? What do your wives carry and how?
I've seen several people, men included, like a lot of men don't like wearing belts. They wear jogging shorts or jogging pants. And they carry this thing, it's a neoprene belly band. It wraps around them and closes with Velcro. And it has a holster made into it for the gun you're carrying. And it goes around the midsection. And it works for men and women.
Any other guys want to weigh in on this one? Okay. I'm a big believer in having them in different places, and especially as a ladies can come in handy. You know, I would have one in the purse and at the desk and in the car. Basically, something. If you have them in multiple locations, then there's not somebody between you and them. If somebody comes in, I've always got one in my pocket. But if I don't, my desk, my office is behind me, and there's one in there. If we're in the parking lot, I got one in the vehicle. So as long as you have positioned them in places where you are not, you don't have somebody between you and them, you're probably going to be able to get to them. You get to them, you're going to be fine. So I'm a big believer in multiples just because of that, but I like the neoprene belly band thing. What else?
What should you do if you collect all the emojis on your dashboard of your car?
What do we do? What now?
What should you do if you collect all the emojis on the dashboard of your car?
Collect all the emojis on the dashboard of your car. You're probably going to have to translate that for me.
The lights.
Oh, the lights. Okay. I mean, you need to remember something. We're old. Okay. So when you collect all the lights, Brother Robert, you know a little bit a few things about car. Miss Stacy wants to know what do you do if you collect all the lights? If all the lights are on the dash, what should she do exactly? Yeah, exactly. All the warning lights are on. Yeah.
Stop.
There you go. Very good. Pretty good. Stop. Yeah, stop. Absolutely. True story.
Call Brother Ford.
Yeah, call Brother Ford. Exactly right. True story. Early years of the church, we had a girl here that got saved, young lady here that got saved, and she bought a car, and after a year and a half, she got it to one of our mechanics in church. She said something's wrong with the car. It's not running. And he called her back later that day. He said, when's the last time you put any oil in this car? And she said, I don't have to do that. It's a new car. It had been a year and a half. There was no oil in it. She locked it up. So if you see a light come on, first of all, identify the light. Okay, let's figure out what the light is. If it's that engine light and it's blinking, stop. Yeah, if the engine light's on, that's bad. If it's blinking, stop me. If more than one's on, stop. Because you can always call somebody to look at it. But if there's a whole lot of lights coming on, there's probably a reason. So yeah, stop. It's better to get somebody to look at it than to drive it till it blows up. So, good question. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Jana.
What are maybe 2 or 3 spiritual truths that you've told your family that you folks live by, that your family knows this? We're the Nuras. This is.
So you want 2 or 3 spiritual truths we've taught our families to live by.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with Jimmy on that one. Yeah. Spiritual truths you taught your family to live by. You've got a wife and raised a daughter. What are some of the spiritual truths you've given them?
Never, feel ashamed to cry for help to God. That's a big one. Some people, they don't like asking for help, and especially guys. We have egos, everything. But know that you can't do it all, and if you need the help, don't be afraid to, call on God.
Chip, see if you got one, Dad.
Number one, live for the Lord. But one of the things that we've tried to do is tell our daughter to be the bigger person.
What's wrong with our microphones? Try this one again.
These microphones.
Yeah.
But anyway, to be the bigger person, when they have the opportunity to retaliate or something for somebody that's done them wrong or hurt their feelings or something. I always try to tell her, do what's right. Be like Jesus. Be the bigger person in that. That's
Bruce,
a couple of different things.
I kind of missed this when I was talking about work situation earlier and stuff. But Brother Robert come back. Was just always talk to the Lord. He's always there. Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not." And as a man and having a family, for me, a lot of times, it's like Jimmy said, there's situations where I didn't know what to do. I'm like, Lord, I don't know what to do, but talk to the Lord first. Go to the Lord, and He will show you, or at least He'll guide you. He'll send somebody along. He'll send something to happen. He'll take care of it. So, that's what I would say.
The one we have used probably more than any other, stated or unstated, is pray together all the time. Since our kids were little, we'd gather together every single day, talk about the day, pray over the day, ask them questions before they leave anywhere. We're praying for them. It's now to where they come find us before they leave, so we can pray over them. And I knew that lesson had gotten through the day they started praying over us when we were getting ready to leave. Of course, they phrase it weird in Gen Z. My daughter will come and she'll say, "Let me speak Jesus over you," which I get that. That's fine. It's a weird way to say it, but it works. And she'll my little daughter's putting her hand on my head and speaking Jesus over me. That's when I knew it had gotten through to them. You're actually supposed to be praying and talking to the Lord together and for each other. When they're out at night, we're up. We're praying for them until we hear the vehicle come into the driveway. There's nothing more important you can communicate to them than that God is real and that we can talk to Him and that we should be talking to Him. So you pray with them together.
So we talk a lot about resilience, about being steadfast, sticking into things, but how do you know when to walk away from a situation and when you need to knuckle down and stick in harder?
Ooh, that's a tough one. We teach people resilience, stick in there, hang in there. How do you know when to walk away, when to stick in there and keep on going a little bit harder? Let's start with a Chip on that one.
That would be a tough one for me because I generally don't want to quit on anything or anybody, and I always want to try to give people the benefit of a doubt. I know there's a time where you have to, but I am probably the worst person to ask that because, like I say, I really do want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I don't want to give up on anybody. Certain situations you'd have to, like a marriage where there's an abusive relationship. That's a situation where they don't need to stay in it just because, well, I've got to stay married, because the Lord wants me to. There's certain situations where it could be, dangerous to do that, or someone has continually tried to take advantage of you, that you may have to distance yourself from that. Did that answer that any?
At least in one context, in a general context of when to quit, when not to quit. Let me put it to you this way. Your default should be to not quit. Because Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall we faint not." So your default will be not to quit. If God wants you to change avenues, He'll make that clear enough to where the way the old-timers used to put it was, He'll take the burden off of you there and put it somewhere else. In the context of a church, I've been here for 28 years, and I've had numerous opportunities to go elsewhere, and I'm still here and still planning on being here until I'm dead, because God has never one time taken the burden of this off, and I've asked Him not to. If he does, it's up to Him. But unless God Himself takes a burden off you and says, "No more, now time to switch," well, then you probably stick in there. Now, when you're just talking about a secular setting, a job, something else, that changes things a little bit, and yet it does not change the need to pray and ask God what He thinks, because He knows what you don't know. So I'd be more inclined to consider a change in a secular setting than I would a spiritual setting, if that makes any sense. I mean, I would consider changes in spiritual settings, but a lot slower than secular settings. If you're in a secular job and God opens a door for a better opportunity, that's when you go to pray and say, "Lord, I need some peace." Colossians 3:15, let the peace of God rule in your heart. So if God removes the peace concerning this and adds the peace concerning this, then you can have pretty good guidance that God has said, okay, time for a tweak, time for a change.
I've been working full-time since I was 16. I've never been fired on a job. I always quit or went on to another job, had another job waiting. But I had a supervisor one time, and he told me this, and then I've had several other people after that tell me this. He told me, he said, best thing that ever happened to me was I got fired. He said, because I was fighting with the Lord about changing jobs, but he said I didn't have the willpower to do it and didn't think I could make it. And he said, when I got fired, he said, the Lord opened the door. The door was already there. I just was afraid to step to it. But I think that's the thing, sometimes we fear what God's already got waiting for us. We're just not willing to step through. And when I started carpentry, I've been praying, Lord, I just, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to. I don't know if I ought to start my own business. I don't know. I just didn't know whether to do it or not. And they came up to me at work and said, "Your job's being phased out. They're gonna. You'll have an opportunity to go out into the plant, but you'll have to go start basically on the same job I started when I started there. And I've been 12 years." And I said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and open my carpentry business and start it." And the Lord blessed and always had blessed. So I think sometimes you just have to make sure that you're in God's will, and then sometimes you just have to step out on faith. You really do.
Even if you don't understand, let the peace of God rule in your heart. Good.
Karis, about your question, other than God, seek godly counsel. I'll tell you a little bit about my situation. I was in business with a fella for 20 years, and there was problems going on, and I didn't know what to do. And I pretty much always worked for myself. I've been in multiple different business ventures. I always had a partner, but I didn't know what to do. I said, well, I'd done been talking to God about it. I said, I need to talk to the preacher. And I came and talked to him. We talked several times, and he gave me some advice on what to do. So not only do you have a preacher, you have him as a father also. So seek godly counsel, and he'll open that door. And that's exactly what the preacher told me when actually I bought my partner out.
Yep.
He said, when the time comes, you buy him out. God will open that door. And that's what he did. And same thing with any job will be the same way. When God's ready for you to move, you seek the godly counsel, and he'll open that door and move you on to bigger and better things.
Proverbs says the multitude of counselors are safety.
As Robert said that, and I kind of wanted to say it, did this answer to Karis too. So March 29th, 2009, preacher may not even be familiar with this date, but I walked into his office and I told him, I said, listen, I want you to pray with me about something. I'm thinking about switching careers, doing something different. And he said, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to pray all through April. So that was March 29, 2009. We prayed, he prayed with me all through April about that. And the first Sunday in May, I came to his office and he said, well, what do you think the Lord's guiding you to do? And I said, well, he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He said, wait. And it was about 2.5, 3 weeks later, my employer, who was like my dad to me, he got killed. And it kind of threw everything into like as far as my career and work and changing jobs, everything was just thrown into a tailspin. And, I didn't understand, why we were going through that. And, I didn't want to be there. And here Elwin had gotten killed, and I was basically taking over his role. And so there were many times where I would say, God, I don't understand why you still have me here. I mean, I actually got really frustrated with God. It's one of the times in my Christian life that I was really frustrated with God because I just didn't understand why I couldn't move on. And to make the long story short, I finally applied for the job at the city of Shelby. And the HR lady called me on March 29th, 2018. And if the date sounds familiar, that's 9 years to the day that I walked into preacher's office and told him to start praying with me about a new job. And so when she offered me that job, I said, Deb, I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, you're offering me this job 9 years to the day that I walked in my pastor's office and asked him to pray with me about a different job. And so, it was kind of, sometimes it's hard to wait when, you may be in a situation where you want to leave, but trusting God and praying and getting godly counsel and then just waiting on God, it's worth it, even if it takes a while. And I hope it doesn't take anybody 9 years, but sometimes it takes time. You have to be patient. Think about Sarah and Abraham, how long they waited for Isaac.
That's good. Anything else? Miss Vicki.
This would be a question for the ones that have raising boys and girls. I just want to know how you go. Do you discipline them the same, or how do you go about that? Do you let them pull the female card? That's what I call it.
I'll start, then I'll turn to one or two of the others back here. There was a fun time that my kids still hassle me over. Back when they were young at the old house, and none of them would admit who had done something. So I paddled all of them because they wouldn't admit, and it turns out later it was Alethea. She got everybody paddled because nobody would admit what happened. So they're still bitter at her and me to this day. And when they're little, the punishment's probably going to look a lot the same. As they get older and they become more distinct, then the punishment changes sort of along with that. And we found out there were things that would get to the heart of some that did not get to the heart of the others. The goal was never to mete out punishment. Again, the goal was to produce a change in behavior and attitude. So we try to learn our children and figure out what's the best form, way, time, method, manner to punish to achieve the desired results. And it's not just that the boys and girls are different. Even the girls are different. Karis and Alethea growing up, very different. Two girls in our home, but their entire mannerisms are different. Their entire thought process was different. So we didn't even discipline them exactly the same way. So to me, it wasn't just that the boys and girls are different. It's that every child is different. And you go before the Lord and you figure out what's going to work best for this child as far as punishment goes. I know you talk about the rod, but that can take a lot of forms in Scripture. Lord, what's the rod for this one? Is it an actual spanking? Is it some form of a grounding? What's going to get to this one's heart? Dana used to talk growing up about her home and how the rough home. And she said in so many words that the older sister was really stubborn, and got a lot of discipline, a lot of paddlings. Josh the same way, but for Dana, she said Mom and Dad could look at me, and I'd burst into tears. So the heart is very different. So in Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go." It's more than just force it into a mold. It's figure out what it's going to take to get them into that way. So every child will be different, not just boys and girls, every child. Wayne has got boys and girls, obviously. Brother Robert has got boys and girls, obviously. Brother Ford has got boys and girls, obviously. Brother Ford, I'm curious from you, what was it like? And as far as punishment goes, because I know Stacy never did anything wrong. I'm aware of that. I'm completely aware of this. But what was the punishment? How'd you handle that with a boy and a girl?
Well, you pretty much stated it. You have to know the child. And I had to be real careful coming out of the military because straight off, I didn't, as a staff sergeant, that's in Army, but as a first-class petty officer, I couldn't have a difference. They all had to be treated the same, and I needed the reaction to be the same. So when I turn around and come home, I had to adjust, and that's when your helpmate comes in. Although we did lose my wife, I had to change things up. And I went to prayer most of the time, and I went to the Bible most of the time. And the biggest thing is to back off, have the patience, focus yourself first. And you got to run through the punishment. If you lack off, she pulls a little girl card.
Can't imagine that.
I have to stop and say, little girl card's not working. Not working. I told you this. This is the rules of the house, and you need to stick with it. It's hard. My dad used to get us, and he said, this is going to hurt me worse than you. Back then, that didn't phase it. But it does. And rather it hurts either one of you, you got to pull through. Don't threaten. Don't count. Just be stern and fast, but loving. Again, think about it before you do it.
That answer that question okay? Any other questions? What now? You got 7,000 children there, Gary. I am curious about this. When you've got a bunch of kids in the home that are still fairly little, how does the punishment that you mete out on one impact all the rest as a whole and individually?
Usually, I mean, it's echoing pretty much how you had said for it, that each of them are different. I had to learn that when we had Easton and then we went to Landon. I learned really quickly that Easton's very hard-headed.
Can't imagine that.
Landon, you could just talk to him and he would tear up at you. And each one of them I've had to learn differently throughout them. But usually if they've learned that if one gets in trouble, that is bad to say, but it's kind of an example between them. They'll know that if one gets in trouble for leaving a mess here, that the rest of them will learn that they shouldn't do that. But one thing that helps a lot, I know everybody's situation is not the same, but the discipline, growing up, I always thought it was always on the man alone, but having a good helpmeet and a good wife, the discipline doesn't always have to come from the husband.
Good.
There's some things that, especially stepping back, like Brother Ford had said, that to step back and cool off for a moment, there's things that my wife can discipline them better than I can. There's certain things that she has a different light or a different set of eyes on, and so do I, that I have different eyes on, that we can see which one the discipline and punishment would be best for them by that person's experiences.
Good. All right. Anything else? Yes, sir, Brother Daniel.
I want to say something that kind of bothered me when I was a kid, that really, really probably put a hurting on me and my mom's relationship. The fact when my dad would do something and ground me, never go behind her back and say that, hey, I wouldn't have done that to you. Because I looked at my mom as a very terrible person, because my pastor stood up there and my Bible told me my mom was supposed to support my dad. So as a young man, I did not, that was not, it didn't show me any respect, and it really hurt our relationship for a long time.
Yeah. So the way I put it when I'm doing marriage counseling is always present a unified front. If you disagree about a matter of punishment, pull it behind closed doors to have a disagreement. I mean, I've told people, hey, tell your kid, oh, we're so mad, me and your mom are so mad, we got to go talk, friends. You stay here. Then get behind closed doors and, okay, all right, what's the deal? We're obviously on the same page, and then get on the same page and then come back out. You've got to present a united front. There can never be any hint of disagreement, because children are really good at exploiting that. They really are. They're tremendous at that. So make sure you always present a united front, always at all times. What else?
Kind of like a tie-off of that. Say you like marry somebody or come into a marriage and they already have kids. How does like discipline work then if you're like a stepdad or like a stepmom?
That is a much harder situation. It is a much harder situation. Ideally, for a good long time, it is going to be the biological parent that does all or the bulk of that, because your primary goal in that situation is going to be to establish a rapport in the home with them. It builds a lot of resentment, and I've seen this happen repeatedly through the years. It builds a lot of resentment when somebody who is not the mom, the dad, starts wailing on a child. You cannot do that. So before anybody enters a situation like that, you've got to be aware that you're going to have to sort of tie your own hands for a little while because your goal is going to be to build a relationship to the heart. And especially if there's another parent out there somewhere, where there is in so many situations these days, a lot of trickier situation. So the more you can rely on, the biological parent to do so, the more you are going to keep things calm, and you can back them up rather than having a blow up and a split in the home, if that makes any sense. Harder situation. What else?
Have you ever had to apologize to your kids for how you represented God to them, and how did you navigate that?
Not necessarily how to represent God to them. I have had to apologize to them, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I've apologized many times to them through the years for ways I've overreacted, for things that I assumed that were not true. And I'm going to ask some of these other men the question when I'm done answering it. But a man that I had some respect for at one time told me, you can never apologize. It shows weakness. I lost a lot of respect for him that day because that's stupid and unbiblical. People will respect you more if they see that you have the character to apologize. So parents, in my estimation, don't ever fear to apologize. If you've gotten it wrong, say so. Say so. You'll build a lot of respect for them. So that's my thoughts on that. But Jimmy, what are your thoughts on that? You had one child growing up. You ever had to apologize to Miss Sierra for anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am English, Irish, Scottish, and have a fireball temper. And yeah, I've gotten some things wrong and had to apologize for it, no doubt.
Bruce, how about you?
Yeah, you gotta be able to apologize, and you gotta be. I guess you just be careful what you say up front. But like you said, sometimes your temper gets the most of you or whatever. But you can't be. You can't take the thought that you can't apologize. You can always apologize, and you need to do it in humility. And it shows your kid that there's a human side of you. You're not just some kind of, overbearing monster that's over their lives, So, yeah, you got to be able to apologize.
And I'm going to flip the script on that one just a little bit. True story. Won't give any details on it. But, we always, as the adults, we're the ones that apologize first through the years. They didn't know they were supposed to apologize for stuff. We had to teach them that. But there came a day when one of my children came to me for something that had happened like a year or two earlier and said, "Hey, Dad, I got to think about that, and I was wrong, and I apologize." Well, they learned that because we were willing to apologize. So if we're not willing to apologize, how can our kids ever learn how? But if they see us willing to make things right, they'll be willing to make things right. So parents, apologize for your kids' benefit, because that's where they learn it. So, great question. Anything else?
I was raised by a Vietnam sniper, and he is one of the hardest men anybody probably ever met. He killed multiple people and was actually proud of it. And my grandpa was the opposite of that. He was one of the meekest men I ever met. My dad took the road of, you don't apologize, it's weakness, suck it up, get over it, you'll be all right. My grandpa was the opposite. He showed me how to apologize. And I got a lot of my dad's tendencies, but watching my grandpa apologize to people, I watched him apologize to my dad multiple times, and I learned that from him. But it's one of the hardest things I've ever done is be able to apologize to my children and my wife. And it brings out a whole lot of humility. And don't ever let what happened to you in the past determine your future. My dad did that, and he died many years too young from a lot of suffering. I watched my grandpa follow God, take me and my brother to church, keep us in church even when my dad wouldn't. And he lived to be very old, and there's a lot of people respected him for that. And if it wasn't for throwing off the offers to go to houses of ill repute when I was 16, all the beers I was offered, all the pot I was offered, and following my grandpa's leadership and going to church, my family wouldn't be here today. And it's all because he apologized for some of the raising that he did with my dad. And my dad not apologizing, I saw what should be done.
That's good. Anything else?
Why do dads
torment their kids?
Because it's fun.
That's exactly right.
No, it's not.
Right there, man, right there. See, it's called the rite of passage. See, one day you'll be able to torment your own children. That's the way this works. It just goes from one generation, to the next. I mean, that's the way it is. That's what makes being a dad worthwhile. I mean, it's so very good. I mean, all dads have to, when the kids come to them and say, "I'm hungry," you have to go, "Hey, hungry, I'm dad." I mean, we have to. It's what we do. It's what we do. So this has been good.